to the Black City channel. For the new subscribers, for the new listeners, welcome. You know what I mean? And for my old people who's been here for a long time and they're still just waiting for what's to come, I appreciate y'all for being patient. And but now we just have to come and just really, talk to y'all about the things that are happening in our society right now, the things that are happening with our youth, the things that are happening in our community, and how we can really, attack this and, try to resolve and solve so many problems that are going on in our society and especially with our youth. You know what I'm saying? So I know it's been a minute, but now's the best time, to start really, coming to y'all day by day, you know what I mean, and just giving y'all some of my, thoughts and, some of my, you know, way that I feel like, we can sort of, attack this thing together and really, just be vocal about it. So anyway, before we get any further, I want to start with a poet, you know what I mean? And, this really, gonna resonate with the youth, you know, and a lot of people out there too. So, just want y'all to, take this minute, right? And if you got the time, man, record this, man, because this is some powerful stuff, you know what I'm saying? So it goes something like this. They say life is hard, but we're trying to figure it out. You either blend in or you're the one standing out. The cards are dealt. You can take the lead or be the one to follow the route. Your heart is wealth. Take control and let your presence be felt. Keep your guard up. They say love will get you killed. That's a business for real. Take a look at your circle. Some will get you for meals. Eating off the same plate while they're doing some deals. The same nigga that you have while you chill at your crib. In the courtroom's confession now. Time to reveal. Word up. It's a cold world that we're living, but we gotta prevail. Blowing out all the toxic that you niggas inhale. Rest in peace to the brothers that are dead or in jail. Doing life in a box in a 4x cell. Goddamn. We gotta keep the faith alive because we're ready for change. We came a long way, but still buckled in chains. True story. Now, let's get to some serious topics and some serious things that's been happening. But first of all, and most of all, I want to send my condolences, to our community, the families who've really lost, you know, especially out here, in Melbourne. You know what I mean? The families who've lost their kids through violence. And, to everybody who's lost somebody through violence, and especially right here in this country that we live in that we call Australia. I gotta admit, Australia is one of the best countries, in the world, when it comes to a lot more, safety and just, the way of living, So, I feel like, I haven't been, to most of the countries in the world, but, like what we can see and, how it is, I mean, it's a lot more safer than it is here than it is in the UK, than it is in the US, than it is in a lot of countries out there, So I just want to give a heads up, and, really want to, give the thank you to the people of the land here, what I mean, the Aboriginals, the Indigenous. This is your land, and we just, appreciate y'all, for, I gotta thank y'all for accepting us, in your land and just, just being here and, hopefully we can make a lot of changes, the way that things are right now. But, at the end of the day, it really comes, as we've all seen, what I mean, it's not up to the government anymore. I say the people, we have the power, the people have the power. Hopefully one day the people can really, get together, what I mean, understand how much power they really hold and how much of a difference they can make once we unite. Unity is the one thing that's really been taken away from society. There's a lot of just dramas and, just not understanding and, a lot of blame, what I mean, in our society right here in Australia and everything that's going on, between black, white, yellow, brown, and all that. So there's a lot of finger pointings, a lot of things being happening. And, like the march on the 31st, to say that, send the immigrants away, send them back home. I got to tell y'all, we all immigrants, every single one of us, except for the people of the land, the indigenous people. So, the only thing that we can really do to come and, try to really, help solve this problem is the people really uniting and coming together, black, white, yellow, every single person to realize, man, we all in the same boat, and we just seem to, look at each other like we're not in the same boat. Some people, want to act like, they're in a bigger boat and a better boat, a situation like that, and looking at the others like you came in a smaller boat, and all this kind of nonsense. But, at the end of the day, we all struggling. We understand everything is going up, except for our price, except for our paychecks, rent, food, every single thing. People are really trying to control this world, and yet, they're just making us, really fight amongst each other, through all of this. And when we do that, they win. You know what I'm saying? So, the more we fight amongst each other, the more, whoever's trying to take control wins. You know, the government, I see them as just the puppets. They are being controlled to themselves because, I'm sure if you got a heart and, you see what's going on in this world and everybody's struggling in situations like that. But, if you're blind to it, then, then you don't really know what's going on. You're not in the reality of, the people out here that are really living this, you know, in these moments and, this life that we live out here in that. So, at the end of the day, it's all about unity and coming together and making things happen. Now I actually want to go into, what's happening with our youth, right? And, at the end of the day, it's like, I don't have, the solutions. I don't have all the solutions, but, I just want the Australian public and everybody to know, you know, as Sudanese, myself even, is we're being given this, you know, this image, that the media really likes to portray a lot. And, they just, we're just being looked at as, we're bad people, we're thieves, we're killers, we're doing all of this. And, we come from a twin world country. Now just to remind y'all, you know, as the Sudanese in this country, especially the ones who were born here, they have no, recollection about back home in Sudan. What I mean? They don't know a lot about, what their parents went through, what their parents had to fight, and the sacrifices their parents had to make, just to come here, what I mean, to give a better life. And people look at it like, especially to the youth now, what I mean, with all this violence going on, especially in Melbourne, people seem to have this, you know, this image and, this thought that, like we're bringing, the Sudanese are bringing what they had back home, bringing it to here. Like, what I mean? Like we were stealing, killing, doing all of that, stabbing each other with machetes and, fighting each other with machetes and weapons and things like that. But, the fact of the reality is, no, 90% of the people, what I mean, who come here, right, are far from that. Like back home, just to remind y'all and to tell y'all is, back home, if you get caught stealing anything, what I mean, from a shop or whatsoever, right, is there's the consequences are far more worse than what people get over here. All right, so I'm sure y'all seen the movie a lot too, Blood Diamond. Short sleeve, long sleeve. What I mean, you can get your hand cut off. You can get, you can get burnt. And just there's so much more to lose for trying to steal a little something, like even an avocado or just an apple or something like that. What I mean, from a shop. What I mean, like you get chased down and you actually, that might be the last day that you spend on Earth. So a lot of us, we weren't, into that. What I mean, stealing and doing all that nonsense that y'all really think that we're about, because that's just the what they call the rebels, right? You know what I mean? And the rebels, obviously, they're funded by whoever, who knows who, but it's not from it's not from the government, but it's from outside sources outside of the country. So how they get their hands on all these weapons, machine guns, AKs, and all of that, they don't come from from our country, you know. So a lot of that is being funded by outside source, outside people who want to control things, and that's why there's just so much violence, and so much of that in our country. So that's why we had to flee away from our country, what I mean, because a lot of innocent people, a lot of innocent children, mothers, what I mean, are just getting brutally murdered, you know and just a lot of bad things happening to them, so we don't we've got lucky to be able to escape that and come to this beautiful country called Australia. Now, even still in myself, as I was a kid, that was the most paranoid thing that I could ever do, even to just to steal a chocolate bar. I mean, let's say from Woolworths or something like that. It was one of the hardest thing that I could ever do, because we still scarred, and have them thoughts and images of the consequences back home. But a lot of that is something out here that we've been that we're being taught, that it's being taught like it's normal freaking damn thing. What I mean, by a lot of our you know white friends and things like that, because they do it and make it look so make it look like there's no consequences, and obviously the consequences are not that deep, what I mean, for stealing just a little something like that. So it just being living here and just seeing that so much, and being around with the wrong people at a young age, because when a young age is you don't know who you are, you don't know what your purpose is, you don't know your identity. And it's so easy to just get lost, and just having the wrong crew around you and the wrong people around you. So a lot of that things that that are happening right now, especially in Melbourne, is a lot of things that what I mean, that we that they've learned and seen, what I mean, in this country. And to say, man, it's like the media doesn't make it any better. What I mean? The the movies, the black people, hip hop, and everything like that. What I mean? It doesn't make it any better. So when you turn on your TV, and usually when you see black people, what I mean, you're seeing in movies, you've seen them as the bad people, you've seen the ghetto, you've seen them as the, what I mean, the stealing, and all the negative things that you can, possibly sort of think of. And then you'd have your couple of good, you know, black people on, what I mean, in movies, like they're the cops, or, they're doing this and that. But, the way like it's portrayed is for, what I mean, it's just, black people just, they're just being downgraded. What I mean? They're just being downgraded. And as a kid, in this country, and, trying to look for, role models, and, things like that, you know, it's, it's hard to look, and there is nowhere else that you could really look except for what they show us in the goddamn TV. So a lot of African kids, our role models were everything that was on the American goddamn TV, because the kids out here, and, people out here, it's like, that's the pedestal that they put us on. And, it's like people don't ask us about war or where we actually come from, what I mean? Especially, African, Sudanese, and that, people don't ask us where we come from, or how it's like back home, or, what it is. You came from a war-torn country and things like that. What I mean? We just easy to be put in a pedestal of, you listen to rap, what I mean? You play basketball, what I mean? You play, you do this, you do that. So everything that, we see in the American TV and the black folks, seem to be resonated with, all the Africans down here. So, it was kind of hard, because then by then it's like, you don't know your identity. Our parents hit, were still trying to get, understand this country. And, so they couldn't really, teach us so much about this country yet, while themselves they were still learning. So there's just been a lot of, mishaps and, misunderstandings. And, and then as a teenage kid too, like, when you walk out the house of your parents' door, it becomes just you against the world. So it's you against the world, and you walk out there, and it seems to be, the wrong people seem to attract you because you're a black person, and that is just the image that they have, like either a gangster, what I'm saying, or you're an athlete or something like that. So and it's just a lot of conflicts, between that of really just understanding who we are, as people and as African, and as South Sudanese. So as ourselves as youngsters, we lose our identity. We then fall into this narrative, that's being given. And yeah, and the next minute is just this is who we're supposed to be. And as a youngster, you just try to find yourself to fit in somewhere. You're either bullied or you end up in the wrong crowd. And when you don't end up, when you're not in that crowd, it's like you getting bullied, until you find yourself, start looking, in the mirror and the TV, and and you're finding yourself and who you're supposed to be. So you just end up going, the wrong path, as a youngster. So for me, I don't really much blame, these kids, you know, for, a lot of mistakes, that they do, because this is just all they've been exposed to, and, there's, especially, let's say Melbourne, man, that's the underground world, in Australia, everybody knows that, it's where the, gangsters, gangs, and, all of this, really come down. So when you look at that, and then, black people coming in now, it's easy to be recruited, it's easy for the wrong people to, to approach you, and just sometimes, offer you protection, offer you some money, offer you things that you don't actually, you don't have in this country, especially as a black folk, So there's times back in my days when, I used to go club with my white friends, and, the next minute, I'm getting chased out by, half of the club, by, by all, white people and situations like that, young teenagers and that, and just being chased out in the club, being jumped, and just, put in, situations, where it was very, uncomfortable and, threatening, life threatening and things like that, So sometimes even myself, I feel, I say I'm blessed and lucky, to still be here today and just, learning through, these life experiences as a young person, and to really, to really keep trying to find myself and, who I am, and my culture and my identity, as a young Sudanese person in Australia.